Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined, as always, by my trusted colleague, Weston Hodkowitz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field a day later than usual, Wes, because of the Monday night game and some, I guess, call it a tight schedule with regard to the studio in which we shoot the show here. So, recording this on a Wednesday instead of on a Tuesday for our first show of the week. But we're here to talk about a 24-12 victory by the Green Bay Packers over the Los Angeles Rams. And the bottom line is the Packers are 6-8, and they're still alive.
They are, and that was what you and I talked about all last week. You couldn't look past the Rams. You had to win this football game to make the rest of this thing count. Green Bay came out and did that on Monday night. To my eye, I know, as Aaron Rodgers talked about and as a lot of people mentioned, this is the type of team they needed to beat, right? If you're going to actually say you are a playoff team, you had to turn back a banged-up and beleaguered LA Rams team. But it was how they played throughout the course of the game, I think, that impressed me the most, because I thought offensively they had an identity. They had a game plan for how they wanted to attack LA. They executed it masterfully. 138 rushing yards, Mike, and only one of those carries, the longest one, was for 14 yards. I don't even know how many double-digit yardage plays they had off runs, but they were consistent with it throughout the ball game. Romeo Doubs comes back, leads them in receiving. They got 5 sacks defensively. You look at how they were able to dictate the tempo of this game. Keisean Nixon did Keisean Nixon things on returns. The Green Bay Packers are going to have to play better to beat the Miami Dolphins. But I thought, coming off the bye and coming off the win over Chicago, this was the type of encouraging performance Green Bay needed to build up some of that confidence going into South Beach.
Yeah, like you said, there were a lot of things to like in this game. My list is pretty long, actually. I start with the way they ran the ball against what has been a pretty good rushing defense, even without Aaron Donald, and Donald did not play in this game for the Rams. But when Donald has been out, the Rams have still been pretty stout against the run. But Aaron Jones, 90 yards rushing. A.J. Dillon only ended up with 36 before leaving for a concussion evaluation, which he ended up clearing, actually. So it sounds like all is good with Dillon, and he'll be on the practice field this week. But A.J. Dillon with 2 rushing touchdowns. And as you said, it wasn't it was actually over 140 rushing yards until the kneel downs at the end dropped them back under 140. But it wasn't 140 rushing yards with a 55-yard explosive one in there. They pounded away, and the Rams made it tough at times. There were some tackles for loss in there, some tackles at the line of scrimmage, some -1s, some -2s. But there were times that you saw the holes were there, and Dillon would make the cut into the hole, or Aaron Jones would explode through the hole like he often does. And to be able to, on a fairly consistent basis, get 6 and 7 yard runs against a pretty good run defense, I thought was a tremendous sign. You mentioned the 5 sacks from the defense, most on the season, and the Packers had only had one game this year with even 3 sacks, during which Rashawn Gary didn't get at least one of those. So the fact that, to get 5 sacks and a season high without Gary was a good sign, because that pass rush needs to move forward. And then what more can we say about the special teams return game dynamo in Keisean Nixon? I tell you, there was the one called back on the penalty that was a disappointing call to a lot of people, but he made an impact on kickoff returns. He made an impact on the punt returns. The Packers are winning the field position battle in these games that they're winning because of Nixon and that return unit.
I asked Aaron Jones after the game about Nixon and how that changes the complexity and sort of the composition of an offense when you are starting at midfield or thereabouts. And as Jones pointed out, what you don't think about when you're at the 50-yard line is, first and foremost, you get 2 first downs, you're in field goal range.
Yep.
2, you don't know, it's not easy to not turn over the football at this level. Packers have had one of the very best doing it for 15 years at the quarterback position. But there's a lot of teams that they kind of have a little bit of their, a knot in their throat trying to make sure they play clean football. The reason I say that is a lot of teams, the 25-yard line to the 50-yard line, you're going through some shark-infested waters there, trying to make sure you maintain the possession of the ball, let alone get a scoring drive going. Having a returner like Nixon takes away all of that. And it gives you a little bit of a spark offensively in that you're not starting off at your own 13-yard line. You're not having to dig yourself out of anything. Second right now in the NFL in kickoff return yardage average. Kini Wangawu from Minnesota's tops at 26 yards per return. Keisean Nixon's at 25.4.
Yeah.
Wangawu has a touchdown return on his schedule.
Yeah, 97-yarder. 97-yarder on Thanksgiving night.
When you look at whatever it is now, 8 returns of more than 30 yards, 3, I think, of 50. In an area of the game that has been largely eliminated in the National Football League because of how they've pushed back or pushed up the kickoffs, it's incredible what Keisean Nixon has added. And as I talked with Jair Alexander about after the game, the fact he's doing this while playing the nickel corner position. There's no days off for him right now.
Yeah.
I'm blown away, Mike, because the Packers have had talented returners. 25.4 yards per return. If that ended right now, that would be the Packers' best stat with a guy that's had at least 20 returns since Randall Cobb in 2012. It's pretty astonishing what Keisean Nixon has been able to do on his 28 returns in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Very impressive. And you mentioned that he's playing nickel corner on defense, and what you might have missed piece with some video clips that's on the website right now, I actually took a look at how he's playing defensively at that nickel corner spot. And he's a very solid, steady presence in this defense for the Packers in the secondary. You can check out the video clips. I mean, what the impact that he's making in 2 phases of the game is significant. And I thought this game essentially was decided after halftime. It's 10-6 at intermission. The Packers had deferred on the opening coin toss, so they're getting the ball to start the second half. They drive down the field and get a touchdown, a couple of crucial defensive penalties on the Rams that helped that drive, but the Packers get a touchdown. It's 17-6. Then the defense gets a 3-and-out with the help of a holding call that put the Rams in a long yardage situation. And then the field position comes into play because Nixon returns the punt to midfield. There's also a face mask on the Rams that puts the ball on the Los Angeles 35-yard line. And just a handful of snaps later from the 35, the Packers are in the end zone again. So you come out of the second half, touchdown, 3-and-out, touchdown, and suddenly it's 24-6. And the Packers, for the most part, were in command the rest of the game. Shout out to Preston Smith for his second sack of the game. That was maybe the one moment later on. It's 24-12, and the Rams had crossed midfield on a pass interference penalty, and then Preston Smith kind of snuffed out that drive with his second sack of the game. But other than that moment, from 24-6 on, the Packers were in command of this thing, and it was that sequence of complementary football. The offense doing good things, the defense getting a 3-and-out, the special teams giving you the field position, the offense taking advantage. That's how you take control and win games in the NFL. And it's going to be a lot harder to do against the Miami Dolphins and a team that's right in the thick of the AFC wildcard chase. But that's what you have to have, that type of stretch in a game where you take command of things, and the Packers need to do that again if they're going to continue this winning streak.
Well, and I thought, too, they tried to do the double-double before halftime. That all kind of goes awry. Rodgers gets sacked on the attempted Hail Mary.
Right.
Things are just not going great. You're only up 10-6 at that point. You are getting the ball, but, a lot of things can happen. We've seen a lot of things happen this season.
And the Packers, as I had mentioned last week, the Packers hadn't been great with production on that opening drive of the second half. They'd done it 9 times.
Yep.
They'd had only 1 touchdown and 2 field goals in 9 tries before Monday night. They got their second touchdown, 4th time scoring out of 10 tries, getting that first possession, taking the opening kickoff of the second half, and it worked to their advantage this time.
I'm going to throw some stats at you. You're typically the stat guy.
All right.
I'm going to throw stats at you. First drive, 12 plays, 52 yards, 6 minutes and 14 seconds. Second scoring drive, 11 plays, 74 yards, 6 minutes and 15 seconds. Third scoring drive, the one you illustrated out at halftime, 11 plays, 68 yards, 6:58. I'm not even talking about the fact they were able to run out the clock on the game. Last 8:51 of the game.
8:51
before the nail
clock.
down. There was a great stat that PR maven Tom Fanning, who would never won credit, but I'm going to give it to him anyway, came up with. The first time the Packers have had in back-to-back games in the same season 3 scoring drives of 11 or more plays in the same game this year. Before that, it was 2008. As cool as it is, everyone loves 75-yard touchdowns. There's going to be defenses like LA that are going to make you go the full length of the field. They're not going to lapse. They have speedy guys in the secondary that are going to be able to catch up. The defensive front goes without saying.
Yeah, they're not going to give you the big play. They're going to make you take your time.
And the Packers made it happen. They made it happen with A.J. Dillon on the field, and when Dillon unfortunately had to get, cleared for the concussion, they did it with Aaron Jones, who was banged up, and they did it with Patrick Taylor, who had just been signed to the 53-man roster hours earlier. Aaron Rodgers makes a great throw to Romeo Doubs on the 23-yard gain during that series. The Packers were just so dang efficient in this game. And, Mike, that's what you're going to have to do now, going down to Miami, facing a playoff-caliber opponent, and being able to take care of business. It was a perfect complementary performance in terms of everything we've asked for, with the Packers' defense holding its ground on the opening possession, the Packers' offense giving them a little bit of wiggle room early on, and then L.A. having to play from behind from there.
Well, the other thing we're seeing as this 2022 season has unfolded, you had mentioned Romeo Doubs was back from the ankle injury. You look across the board, both sides of the ball, and even special teams to a certain extent too, which I'll mention. The 2022 draft class, this rookie draft class, their fingerprints were all over this victory. Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson combined for 9 catches and 101 yards. Quay Walker gets a sack and a forced fumble, the first full sack of his career. He had a half sack earlier in the season. He gets a sack and a forced fumble, also has another tackle for loss. Devontae Wyatt gets a half a sack, sharing one with Justin Hollins. Zach Tom at left tackle is filling in for David Bakhtiari. We don't even mention his name. His name doesn't even really get brought up all night long, except for, being part of that big pile that pushes A.J. Dillon into the end zone in the big scrum there. Kingsley Enagbare at edge rusher, who's getting obviously a ton of playing time right now with Rashawn Gary being out for the rest of the year. He gets a sack, almost an interception. And Quay Walker broke up a couple of passes too. Almost had a pick. Tariq Carpenter, the 7th-round pick, is making tackles on special teams. I mean, this 2022 draft class is all over the place. And the Packers are going to need absolutely everything that this rookie draft class has to try to make a run at this thing here, starting with a victory on Christmas in Miami. You get this one, and then you're coming back home for 2 games against division rivals that are indoor teams coming to Lambeau in the cold. Everything starts to feel a little bit more realistic. Packers are going to need everything this rookie draft class has on Christmas Day in Miami, and the way they performed on Monday night was a great sign for what they might be able to do.
The other thing I really liked about this game, now certainly you want consistency for all 4 quarters, but it was how guys stepped up on almost specific series, on plays. You look at Kingsley Enagbare, the play that he gets the first down sack on. He also nearly has an interception on the 3rd down,
right?
On this attempted screen. At the very least, he broke it up.
Yeah.
Devontae Wyatt gets the stop on 1st down in the 4th quarter, then combines with Justin Hollins on the sack, which Baker Mayfield runs right into their lap, but that's football.
Yeah.
As Preston Smith said afterwards, sometimes it isn't about the plays that you're making. It's about making those plays and then seeing what comes to you. I mean, that was kind of Preston's things. Preston's had some good rushes this year that he hasn't statistically been rewarded for. But then you look at, his first sack, someone's helping flush him to him, That's what this defense needs to get out of this group. And, so many of these guys have been put in some really tough situations. Kingsley Enagbare wasn't even really the next guy up at the beginning of the season, and now he's the starting outside linebacker with Preston Smith.
Right.
Zach Tom, as I wrote last week, had only played in 5 games. I think that's the thing that people forget about. He has these 3 spot starts. He's sat the other 8 games before last week. It's these guys being ready for the moment. And that's ultimately going to take you far in this league, because if you can be ready in adverse moments, you're going to be ready for the ones that you're prepared for too. And it's exciting to see. Certainly, you look at Quay Walker, 100 tackles on the season. Christian Watson has been a completely dynamic and causing defensive pass interference penalties and blocking on the Aaron Jones touchdown run and catching passes. But it's when you're getting contributions from the 5th-round picks, from the 4th-round picks, and you're getting those immediate returns, it doesn't get any better than that for a football team.
Yeah, this draft class showing all kinds of promise. I want to get to what was a crazy weekend in the NFL after a little bit of sponsor business here, Wes. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50 years of better. All right, Wes, I don't know where you want to start with regard to everything that happened in the NFL prior to the Packers and Rams on Monday night. You have the crazy comeback by Minnesota. You have the absolute madness of a final play in Patriots-Raiders. You have just absolutely brutal clock mismanagement by the New York Jets against the Detroit Lions. And then you have the officials inserting themselves and then not inserting themselves on the final drive of the Washington-New York Giants game on Sunday night. It was a nutty weekend of NFL football, so I'll let you go where you want to go.
Let's start off with the things that impact the Packers the most first, and it was the Giants-Washington game in terms of this wild card chase. I feel terrible for Ron Rivera in that football team. I feel terrible for Taylor Heineke. I feel terrible, for those receivers. One of the more peculiar, in a season in which I think the officiating in this league has been really poor. What can you say about how that game ended? And then reading the pool report afterwards, it's just, I don't even. One of the things I really liked, and I've said this numerous times when Dean Blandino was the head of officiating in the NFL, was even if his guys got it wrong, and we're all human, and this game is moving at 1,000 miles per hour, I get it, but Dean Blandino would almost put out a statement every week commenting on the officiating. And since he left, and there's been numerous people in charge of the thing now, I feel like we're missing the accountability piece. And reading that pool report, I don't know what was more infuriating, the way that game ended, Terry McLaurin checking to see if he's on sides on the line of scrimmage.
Lined up on the line of scrimmage, right.
And then God only knows what happened in that interaction. And then for the receiver to just be completely manhandled on the play, it was strange. The whole thing was strange. And then the conversation afterwards with the reporter felt weird and surly and curt. If you're the Washington Commanders and you're their fans, I just don't know how you come out of that not feeling like you just got completely jobbed out of that.
Yeah, or at least to the extent that not that anybody necessarily wanted to see the Giants and Commanders tie again in the rematch, but that game looked like it had overtime written all over it, right? That it shouldn't have necessarily been decided in regulation, that you go get the touchdown, the 2-point, you go to overtime tied at 20-20, and decide what had been a pretty well-played, entertaining football game and a very impactful game as far as the playoff chase. Decided in overtime and see what happens with those two teams having already played in overtime earlier this year. And from that standpoint, Washington was robbed of that opportunity.
The Giants are 1 win away from clinching a playoff spot, and they didn't beat Washington this season. In this rematch, the officials beat the Commanders.
Yeah.
That's a shame.
Yeah, it is. The thing is,
where do we go from here?
Well, the thing is, and I don't want to make it all about the officiating, but quite frankly, the fact that Minnesota pulled off the comeback from 33-0 to win 39-36 in overtime, in some ways overshadowed another horribly officiated game, because the Vikings had opportunities taken away from them by just some really, really bad calls. And by the same token, during the comeback, Minnesota in my opinion, kept getting free 15 yards for supposed unnecessary roughness hits that you look at the replay and you kind of go, oh, that's 15. Like, everything's happening fast because Minnesota's in a hurry and, they got to score a bunch of points. And it was like they're marching down the field getting free 15 yards here and there. And you get one look at the replay and you go, wait a minute. Like, the Colts are not playing well here, but Minnesota's getting a bunch of yardage that it doesn't seem like is legit. So that started things, and I hate that the officiating is such a story in the NFL, but it is.
It's not getting better. That's the problem.
Right.
We've been talking about this for 3 years.
Yeah. It's not
every year.
Better. It's not getting better. The rule book keeps getting thicker.
Yeah.
The rule book keeps getting thicker, and I'll say this. I've said this before in Insider Inbox. I've said it to you when we've had conversations. As annoying and frustrating as it gets to see some of the things that happen on the field, big picture, I don't blame those officials on the field.
No.
I think the NFL has given them way too many rules, way too much to manage, and when you have that much stuff that you've got to try to pay attention to and officiate and get the calls right, that's how some of the obvious, or what should be the simpler, more basic calls of the game are going to get missed more often, because they've got them paying attention to too many things without a system that is robust enough to help them in the way it needs to help them.
That's what, again, bringing it back to the Washington New York game. I love that comment from, I forget which official is even the head umpire that they were talking to, but he's like, well, he could be counting personnel. There's a lot of different jobs that go along with this. It's not just seeing if and it's just like, oh my goodness. But
and it's not. I mean, come on. It's not as though there were a whole bunch of illegal formations being called during the game.
Run.
And then with a minute to go in a one-score game and two teams fighting for a wild card spot, you're going to decide the fact that Terry McLaurin is an extra 2.5 feet off the line of scrimmage, and that's a penalty that wipes out a touchdown when Washington scores on the play and is ready to run a 2-point conversion. Oh no, sorry, illegal formation. We haven't called it all game, and we're going to call it now with the game on the line and take your touchdown away. I'm sorry. There's an officiating problem in the NFL, and the league has to start taking it seriously.
The last thing I'll say on this, this is how the officials and referees got too far involved in the game. Minnesota had the greatest comeback in NFL history. Down 33 points going into the second half. And, dude, by the time that game was over, I didn't care. Like, I honestly, I understand the whole implications. You want the Vikings to be playing for something here. It was the most monumental comeback ever. And literally, I'm watching that game going on Saturday. I'm like, I just want this to be over. It wasn't exciting to me. It was, more frustrating because it's like, who cares at this point?
Yeah, it kind of became the theater of the absurd in a lot of ways. So
hey, Chandler Jones had a
speaking
of touchdown.
speaking of theater of the absurd, I tell you, it's interesting. I mean, we're talking about Robert Saleh's mismanagement of the clock at the end of the Jets-Lions game, and then what the Patriots did on the final play of a tie game. I mean, those two things could cost both of those teams playoff spots here. Those could be the moments that their teams, their fans are going to be looking back on in the offseason if they don't make the playoffs and say, our season ended because of just brain lock type of stuff. I mean, just it's remarkable. I mean, the margin is so small in this league. We know that. There are so many games that can go either way at any moment. And if the craziness doesn't happen in the Patriots game and the game goes to overtime and the Raiders win, maybe the Patriots then still aren't making the playoffs. But when you lose a game that way, when you lose a game the way the Jets did when they're fighting for a playoff spot and they have to settle for a 58-yard field goal to tie, which misses, and their coach took a timeout into the locker room with them after the game that they never used, and they had to settle for 58 yards? Like, come on, man.
That's tough. The Patriots thing, just starting there really fast. I mean, I remember when I first saw it, I was like, oh, so the Raiders were up. It's like, oh no.
Yeah.
Game was tied.
I know. It's like when you first look at it, you're thinking like, oh, like the Patriots were in desperation mode, and this touchdown is only going to impact whatever goes on in Vegas.
Yeah.
No connection to the Raiders specifically, but whatever goes on in Vegas with all the gambling and the over/under and the point spreads and all. It's like, no, the game was tied, and the Raiders just won the game instead of having to go to overtime. Like,
was there anybody that took a bigger L at the end of that game than Mac Jones? One, he gets the ball comes flying out to him. 6'5", 260-pound Chandler Jones catches it, completely pie shoulders him into the ground,
just face plants him.
And then after the game, they asked Bill Belichick about why they didn't throw a Hail Mary, and he's like, "Look, couldn't throw it that far." Like, poor Mac Jones, man. He just taking L's all over the place.
Boy.
If I can really quickly, just to close up the thing on Detroit.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, as much as the Packers are trying to make a run here, Detroit's been doing this thing for a month and a half now.
The Lions have gone from 1-6 to 7-7. Their only loss in that time was at the very end of the game on Thanksgiving to the Buffalo Bills, who of course are right now the number 1 seed in the AFC. That is the only game the Lions have lost over the last 2 months. They are winning the close ones, including the win over the Packers at Ford Field. They've gotten two wins in the Meadowlands, beating both the Giants and the Jets on the road now. And yeah, the Lions are feeling it, and they are right in this playoff chase right now, 1 game ahead of the Packers. And if the Packers can manage to stay alive, it could make things very interesting in Week 18 at Lambeau Field.
A lot more interesting than I think everybody, including myself, thought that Week 18 game was going to be.
Yeah, all right. Well, with that, we will call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team. We will have everything for you leading up to the Christmas Day game in Miami on Packers.com. We'll have another show this week also to preview that game and talk about the Miami Dolphins. For Wes, I am Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next time.